All right, everybody, let's get settled in. So again, don't forget to fill out your surveys for this session and any previous sessions. Again, rochestersecurity.org for that, or scan the QR code. Welcome to Generative AI, Adversaries versus Defenders with Selena Dow. Thanks again to our diamond sponsor, Island, along with our sponsors for this track, Sumo Logic and Palo Alto, and of course, the ISSA team. Selena is a senior solutions engineer at Trend Micro with a focus on educating and delivering technical solutions to the enterprise. Let's give her a good, warm welcome.
Mic check. All right, we are good to go. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone has been enjoying the conference so far. I know it's been a long day, so I really appreciate you guys sitting in for this last session for this track. I promise it'll be a really interesting one around AI. We're gonna take a look at how it's affecting the current threat landscape on both the adversary and the defender side. Let me adjust this a little bit. There you go. All right, so to get started, we're gonna talk about the current threat landscape, right? And look at the top threats that we're seeing that's prevalent right now. First one being, obviously, is ransomware. Right? Ransomware has always been around, but we've been seeing a spike in the last couple of years because of COVID, the transition to remote work from home. It's really hard to get visibility in that aspect, so you're starting to see a lot more threats in that space. However, as the years progress, there's a lot of evolution from a ransomware perspective, right? It's still painful. It's causing a lot of business disruptions and expenses across the board. And according to Coalition, Coalition is an insurance company that did a report, and they found that last year, in 2023, there were over 4,000 victims posted on leak sites just in 2023, and that has been an increase of about almost 50% year over year. In addition, there are loss amounts of up to about 61% from just the first half. From the second half of 2022 to the first half of 2023, right? And so we're seeing that the average ransomware demand is around $1.6 million. So these are really strong statistics, and you can see how costly this can be for a lot of organizations. We're also seeing a shift to exfiltration, right? Now attackers are finding it to be more valuable to skip the whole traditional ransomware encryption process in the first place and just go straight for the data, right? And so we're starting to see a pattern of that for attack groups, just going towards that direction. For instance, there is a threat group, I think it stands for CLOP or CLOP group. Their focus is to target file server systems that you can assume that they have valuable data or sensitive information on those systems. So they will target vulnerabilities, 0 days, and then try to automatically exploit them so that way they can get to the data on those machines, right? And also, exfiltration is harder to detect than your traditional ransomware encryption method because there are so many diverse ways to do it that it's hard to really just pinpoint that process there. And then additionally, the exfiltration is a lot more effective even if organizations have backups prepared. So phishing, this is not gonna go away, right? This is still huge, and it's still considered one of the top initial accesses that we typically see in our IR cases. And the reason why that it's so popular because it works, right? It's pinpointing the processes, getting to the people behind the keyboards, right? You know, humans, we make mistakes, and so that's why phishing is still so still valuable for attackers. So what they'll do is try to send a mix of links, malicious links or files for malware to be downloaded with the purpose of credential phishing or being able to start an initial infection, whether it means to set up a backdoor, for instance. So beyond phishing and beyond ransomware, we have what we call BEC attacks. It's not your bacon, egg, and cheese. It's business email compromise. And this is one of the top attacks that cost businesses a lot of money. I'm surprised that it's not talked about enough as compared to ransomware because based on the same report or the same company coalition, they found that there are 63% more funds transfer fraud, which is a main type of BEC attack, incidents than ransomware in just the first half of 2023, right? So you can imagine, why aren't we talking more about these type of attacks if they're way more prevalent, they cost more money? And this is all about compromising the processes. It's not about trying to get into the network. So attackers are frequently trying to target those fund transfer fraud attempts. And that's just a fancy way of saying, try to pay this fake invoice, right? We've all heard of those. And so on top of that, attackers are starting to find that it's starting to become easier to ask for funds, right? Organizations are starting to ramp up and tighten up their financial processes where they're not releasing money so easily, so quickly, right? But now attackers are just skipping over the money, and they're just going straight for the data. Their thinking is, if we can already get our hands on the money, why not just start asking for the data? And so that's kind of a shift that we're seeing in the current threat landscape for that piece. So those are examples of a couple main sources that we're seeing. But it's important to understand that attackers are always innovating, just like we are as defenders. Our tools, the technology that are in place, attackers are going to try to find a way in, and they're very persistent about it. They operate like enterprise businesses, and so they're very persistent in that manner. So let's take a moment and take a look at some case studies that happened over the year 2023 that made the headlines. So you guys might recognize some of these attacks. So we're going to go into detail about how they were carried out. So the first one being the MGM attack, right? This one was a huge one. It made headlines. And this started from just a help desk compromise. The attacker was able to utilize social media, specifically LinkedIn, to kind of learn about an employee that they targeted and learned enough information that they could just pick up the phone, call the help desk committee or and just be able to ask for a password reset. And they knew enough information to manipulate the help desk employee to release the password reset credentials. So that in turn allowed the attacker to gain access. They had some privileges. They were able to laterally move and access one of the MGM servers, and from there started their data exfiltration. While they're sitting in the environment, they further got access to other MGM servers, and what they did was to put ransomware encryption, locked up those servers, and that effectively locked down the casino operations and hotel operations as well. I remember hearing that some people couldn't even get into their room because the key would not work. In the end, MGM expects that this entire breach costed at least $100 million. So this type of attack is a common one where you're targeting vulnerabilities specifically. So this was a big one that happened around May 2023 in that period. It's called the Move It cyber attack. And essentially, the attackers are going to target vulnerabilities in an outward-facing service that many organizations are using for file transfer, right? So their assumption here is that these file servers had some type of sensitive information, and so they were trying to look for a vulnerability in this file transfer solution, the Move It, right, created by Progress Software. And so being able to exploit that, they were able to access a lot of sensitive information across the customer base that had this installation for this tool, and then be able to do extortion at scale. So this one is a really interesting one. We started to hear more about software supply chain attacks because it really does affect the downstream and has a really adverse effect, right? In this case, there are actually two linked supply chain attacks. So at the beginning, right, there is a 3CX employee. So if you guys haven't heard of 3CX, it's just a company that's responsible for creating voice over IP software, right? So a staff member had their device that was infected by an update from a third-party financial application on that machine. So that's the first supply chain piece to it. And then from there, the attacker got a foothold, and then was able to access the dev server of 3CX. And from here, they were able to install malware into the software update process for 3CX. And so that pushed downstream further to, I think, over 100,000 customers that were using 3CX software at the time. So that just meant the attacker had access to the 3CX environment and every other customer that pushed out this update. So you can see how big of an effect that this could have, especially if it's a supply chain related compromise here. And then also this attack was, I think, seen to be executed from North Korea, which commonly they run cyber crimes to fund their government here. So you guys have some examples of real attacks that happened in the year 2023. We prepared a demo for you guys to see what the anatomy of an attack looks like. Right? It's going to follow a similar structure where it's going to start from point A and then end with data exfiltration. So we're going to be able to see live what it looks like from an attacker's perspective, as well, to run commands remotely as well. All right, so here, right, the first entry is typically a phishing email sent, right? On the right-hand side, it looks like a legitimate email with a Google Drive link, right? But the target doesn't know that this link has a malicious attachment to it. Unfortunately, I think the target's name is Diego. He clicks into it and accesses it on his computer. And unfortunately, when he opens that up, it's going to download a malicious attachment. So he's going to click open, and he doesn't know this, but it's downloading a Cobalt Strike beacon. Essentially, this is your backdoor. It's going to allow the attacker to have C2 or command and control communications to their remote server, so then they can start running commands remotely to this machine here, right? And so the attacker is going to start doing discovery by typing "who am I," right, to understand what type of device this is, who the user is, what the physical address is, etc. Right? This is when they start to dig in and see what kind of information is useful for them. Next is they're going to want to find out what other machines, devices are connected to the network so they can plan their lateral movement. One of the ways is doing port scanning, right? So the attacker is going to do some network discovery and find out if there's any other devices that they can access and what ports are open. And the next piece is being able to laterally move. In this case, they found a print server that has a vulnerability, and so knowing that information, they exploited that print server to gain access. And so this is what you're seeing here, where they are then downloading yet another beacon, malware, right? And then it's just establishing another foothold. But it's a lot more stealthy to be on a print server, right, rather than that employee's machine. So typically print servers could be a blind spot. So that's why it's so significant to be aware of that context in this case, because attackers will do something similar and look for those types of machines that don't really get patched as well. So right now we got that beacon installed. They have another foothold in, and the attacker's primarily going to be using this print server to conduct everything else. So for extra convenience, what they're going to do here to establish a little bit more persistence with the tools that they have at hand, they're going to install a remote desktop tool. So that way, if they need an RDP or get access to other servers in the environment, then they can use the print server to do so. Right. The next step is credential dumping, right? Maybe Diego doesn't have the permissions that he's looking for. Maybe he can't access the domain controller. So what he's going to do is use a tool called Mimikatz. So that way he can extract the credentials from potentially something that is in memory, stored in memory. So he's going to dump that into a file, and then from here, the output is going to come on the screen where you can see exactly what user was logged in, what domain it belongs to, and then be able to actually see the password string as well. So this is very helpful because now he can use these credentials to move further into another critical asset, right? So now the attacker is preparing for exfiltration by deploying a tool. He's pulling this from his beacon, right? A tool called StealBit, and this is going to help enable that data exfiltration as soon as he finds what he's looking for and he wants to get that data out. And then the last step is data exfiltration, where he found what he needed. In this case, it's going to be accessing the domain controller, and he's going to pull all that data out just by using the print server and a C2 server here. So this is an example of how fast all of this can happen. Seeing this from the attacker perspective, you are able to see what kind of commands he was able to run just by having that backdoor. And so like I said earlier, right, this is kind of like a blueprint on what type of attacks generally get carried out. In this case, it started off from a phishing email with a malicious PDF attachment. That employee took the chance and opened that link and downloaded it, which installed that beacon. And so that allowed the attacker to do network and user discovery. And from there, they were able to laterally move to the print server, establish a further foothold, and get the admin credential dumping. And then from there, they were able to access the domain controller and found the information that they wanted. So what's about to get worse, right? We like to think that we're staying one or two steps ahead of the attackers, but it's really important to consider what's changing in the threat landscape, especially with the emergence of AI, right? The threat landscape is always evolving, so it would be a mistake to not mention artificial intelligence in this piece, because right now, attackers are able to utilize these tools to improve fraud effectiveness, because they're able to social engineer and improve that. This can be done manually already, like social engineering, crafting emails, that can be done manually, but with AI, right, this is going to just speed up the process, create more compelling emails that seem more legitimate, because right now, the user base, the average staff member only understands that we got to look for spelling or grammar issues. It's obvious when you get a phishing email, right? But now with AI, you can just simply put in a prompt right here, such as the one on the left, where you ask, hey, please craft an email in X amount of words to this CFO named Todd, right? And then have it signed from the CEO of Bridge Finance named Liz Wang. And then also include this link, which is to a tiny URL, but have it look like it's an actual purchase order. And you have an email resulted from that has no terrible spelling or grammar. You can see how challenging this can be, because now the phishing training is not as effective anymore, because now we can't really just base it off the terrible spelling or grammar. So we're going to have to find a better way to get around this, right? So it's just putting pressure on email security system altogether. On top of that, you typically have attackers that are working from all around the globe. And so now you don't have to worry about translating emails. You can just simply ask the prompt to translate this existing email that I have to French, for instance. I can't speak French. If anyone in the room can confirm, that would be great. But I would assume that here on the right-hand side, this output is perfect, right? You'll notice at the bottom where it says Liz Wang in terms of the signature here, you'll notice that it says PDG. PDG stands for, I think, President Director General. It's a French abbreviation, right? I would not have known that at all. It's a cultural thing for that region, right? And so you can see how valuable this tool can be for attackers to craft emails, because now they don't even have to worry about these types of cultural differences or these little tiny caveats here, right? So small little details really matter. And then additionally, it's improving the effectiveness even more, because you can create more personalized phishing emails, fraud emails, right? Being able to personalize them is in terms of understanding, being able to scrape social media and kind of do a background check to see, okay, what events have they attended? Like, what groups are they a part of? This is really going to help personalize these messages and make it more believable. For instance, the AI is able to check Facebook, Instagram, Twitter or X, LinkedIn, and craft an email like this where it says, "Hey John, it was great catching up with some of your coworkers at last week's Lawyers in Tech meetup." See, that's already a tidbit right there that you wouldn't have known unless maybe you checked their social media or you know them personally. "I saw you weren't able to make it. See this link for some fun photos from the event," right? So this is, I wouldn't have been able to I would have thought somebody would have known or personally knew my coworkers or ran into them for them to send this. And it's an easy, honest mistake to accidentally click that because you wanted to see what photos you missed out on. So it's just an example of showing how AI can really speed up that social engineering and crafting messages like this to send out, right? So another topic is deepfakes. I'm sure everyone has had some run into that or messed around with some tools that can create deepfakes. This will also add more pressure, right? This news article here is coming from the South China Morning Post, where they're explaining that everyone looks so real on the call, essentially. There was a multinational firm in Hong Kong where they lost about $200 million after scammers staged a deep fake video meeting. Now, it's unclear if this incident actually happened. This is just a post that we saw, but this has already happened in other stages, right? So, for instance, political, economical. There has been an incident where a financial institution, surprisingly it was Hong Kong related as well, where they actually did pay out $25 million because they thought they were talking to the CFO, like a CFO from an organization. So aside from that, that also prompted some people to utilize, to look into this more to see if they can create deep fake videos or deep fake technology that can do it in real time. What I'm about to show you guys on the next slide is an example of how you can use deepfake and how effective it is, but it's not in real time. It's just looking at the videos, right? So you just think about it, how before I pull it up, just think about the differences and see if you can catch the small nuances that separate between the original and the fake one, right?
Okay, hi folks. You've got Shannon Murphy here from Trend Micro, and today I'm just going to talk about different things happening in security. So what's the first thing that we can talk about? Let's talk about supply chain.
So she just recorded something that's going to be ingested into a free platform, a free tool where you just need like a little sample of your audio and visual. And what it's going to do is analyze every aspect of that video there to then be able to create a deep fake. So she just recorded a real one here, and she's going to upload it into the AI platform for analysis. And then from there, she's going to use this to type out a script to be able to say what it needs to say, and then be able to send that video out to whoever she's trying to scam, right? She's obviously not going to try to scam anybody. She's a colleague of mine. But yeah, just pay attention to the difference of what the video is going to output and see if you can tell if it's going to be a fake, deep fake. All right. So she's loading the script. It's going to spit out a video result that will play and read that exact script she wrote out.
Hey there, I'm just sending you an invoice over now. I know we didn't get this set up properly, but if you could handle it, I'd really appreciate it. We're past the deadline, but the organizer said if we can get this signed and approved by this afternoon, we will be good to go for the event in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Yeah. So it looks pretty realistic. I mean, what do you guys think? Like, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to differentiate.
She had too many blinks.
Yeah, that's true. That is definitely true. So if I had to really nitpick that, yeah, the facial, you can see the small nuances where she's blinking too much. She's kind of looking off at the wrong time, right? But this is just the beginning of this tool. Like, can you imagine a year from now, especially with the comment I made earlier that they're a group of guys that were looking into the deepfake technology. They wanted to see if they can create something where it's doing this in real time, where you can easily get videos. You don't even have to have them record anything. You can actually pull the videos, photos off of their social media and use that to train the model. So just imagine, like, you guys were able to tell that, like, just imagine how this is going to advance further down the line and how it can be used against, you know, by the attackers for whatever fraud that they're trying to commit there. All right, so one thing I wanted to mention in terms of defenses is multi-factor authentication, right? This technology has been rolled out aggressively across the board, and oftentimes this is a requirement, at least in the United States, it's a requirement for some cyber insurers that you have to have MFA, right? It's still an important defense because oftentimes phishing is targeting credentials, and so if you have this as an obstacle, then it's just adding a little bit more pain for the attacker, right? One more little thing that they need to get over to try to get the credentials, the data, whatever it may be. So that's why MFA is still an important defense. It's better than not having anything at all, right? And plus, it is required by cyber insurers for good reason. You need to have as many defenses as possible. But when there is a popular, widespread defense technology, what do attackers do? They're very persistent. They're going to try to find a way to get around it or get through it. So an example of how they would try to get through MFA, right? We're starting to see an emergence of this type of attack over the past couple years called MFA bombing or MFA fatigue. So essentially what the attacker will do is they have the credentials and they'll log in from their device, but they don't have the MFA access, so what do? They just spam it over and over and over and over again until they cross their fingers and they hope that the user will just press like accept just to stop it on their phone, right? It seems a little, such an easy way. This is not gonna happen to everybody. Not everyone's gonna do this, but sometimes people will, right? It's something to consider. And then on top of that, according to Microsoft, there are over or at least like 6,000 MFA bombing attempts per day. So this is just increasing. They're just trying to get through the MFA authentication piece. Now, a way to get around it, there is a new way for attackers to try to get around the MFA piece. It's a new powerful attack that's coming up, and it's called proxy attack, right? They're gonna use a proxy. This is just an example of how they always innovate. This tool is unfortunately free. It's open to the public, and it's available on GitHub. This is just, it's an effective tool to get around that. So it's really easy for attackers to get up and running with it. So we're gonna look at an example, attacker screen versus the target screen. So for the attacker in the middle, the attacker is gonna send a phishing email to the target, and it's gonna send the user to what looks like a real login page, but really it's a proxy, it's an attacker's proxy. You can tell kind of on the top line of that URL, it's not Microsoft. But essentially the attacker is gonna relay that to the real site when they log in, and that response is gonna get sent to the attacker's proxy. And it's gonna look normal from the user standpoint because they're gonna get the MFA token notification, accept it, and that's just still gonna get sent to the attacker's proxy again. So in this case, on the left-hand side, you're gonna start to see the attacker's prompt here. It shows you the password, the username. You have all that, but you need the token, the session key to actually access it. So he's gonna type in a command, and boom, you have a session key at hand. Copy that to your clipboard, and then open up Google Chrome or whatever internet browser. Add that session key into the browser, and then you assume the identity of that user. It's very powerful because now they have full access to their O365 environment. They can look at emails, whatever it is. they have full access. So that's one way to get around the MFA piece. So I just want to be very cognizant that I'm not trying to point this out to say, hey, we're not saying MFA is dead and to not use it. That's the complete opposite message. It's not time to give up on that. It's still important, it's still effective, and like I said, it's better than not having MFA at all. It's just a reminder that attackers are going to try to find a way around your defenses no matter what. There is no solution or methodology that is 100% bulletproof, because attackers are always trying to find a way in, right? But on the other end, defenders are also trying to innovate as well with our solutions, our security tools, and so forth. So one of the ways that we have defense approaches is being able to focus on the email collaboration systems like your O365, right? So you can have writing style analysis, text analysis for being able to detect intent, tone, or even pressure in those messages, right, to catch those BEC attacks. Even link analysis with AI computer vision, so you can see if it's a credential phishing site. Header and content analysis as well. And then regarding newer MFA technologies, right, we can move forward to having hardware as well as software-based passkeys. There are some organizations that are moving this direction right now already. And then on the identity side of the house, right, for XDR, you can have visibility over user activity. So being able to see where they're logging in, login velocity, if there's any unusual sign-ins, and also any unusual email sent from a legitimate account. So a couple ways to innovate. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are a couple different ways that can combat some of the techniques that we've seen and discussed today so far. So if we zoom out just a little bit, we can see how organizations are responding to these shifts, right? They're doing three important things primarily. There's a lot under that, but a three points here. So the first one being they're getting more proactive with their security strategy. So this looks like discovering their attack surface. Much like how you would want to understand the layout of your house, you want to know what windows have locks on them. You want to know all the doors that an attacker can possibly enter. So back door, front door, all the windows, etc. That is essentially your attack surface, right? You want to have, it's hard to protect something you're not aware of. And so getting that inventory sounds like an easy task. It is not, but it's important to try to understand what your critical assets are in case any of those are taken over. How much of an impact would it be to your business if they were taken over there? And then assessing the risk of each of those assets, right? If I had my front door lock broken and also the back door or the back window, it's shattered, right? In my head, I probably think the front door has a higher risk because it's open to the front street. Anyone can see that when they're walking by. So that should have a higher risk, right? And then in the back, it's still risky, but probably lower than the front one. So this is being able to understand the risk and then understanding the context around it to prioritize the mitigation aspect. You're gonna be able to say, quickly figure out, okay, let's put our resources and time to this front door first, and then we'll get to the rest. So that's what we mean by prioritizing mitigation. And then last point here is being able to implement zero trust. So the philosophy of always verify, never trust, right? So if for instance, let's talk about appliances in your kitchen, right? Those are all assets within your house too. You want to know the health of your air fryer, your Instant Pot. I don't know what kind of appliances you have, but you want to understand the risk of those, right? In case one of the plugs are faulty, you might want to unplug that kitchen appliance, right? Let's unplug the air fryer until it's at a healthy state, and then not allow it to have access to the electricity in that kitchen, right? It's the same thing with the zero trust piece, where you're understanding the health of a certain asset or user. If that health changes and they start to exhibit something a little bit more riskier, let's just cut them from accessing a proprietary application, or internal database or internal application, things like that, right? So ideally, being more proactive is just helping, you're making it harder for the attackers to get in, adding those little hurdles, those obstacles. So that's the idea of being proactive. And when you do that, you can reduce the amount of incidents that happen down the line because you've already nipped the bud towards the beginning. But it's an ongoing process, right? The second piece is being able to detect attackers a lot faster. So if they're in your environment and you want to be able to get notifications and alerts for that. So making sure that you can accelerate the detection is important. And then also improving the visibility with XDR, right? A lot of the times in the past, everything was siloed. And so if you can just connect everything together and have all the data points kind of paint you a story with XDR, then you're quickly going to understand the context of an attack so you can quickly make decisions rather than having to piecemeal everything, and it just takes longer to attack. And you just saw how easy and fast it could be for an attacker to run those commands and just get your data like that. So that's why time is of the essence in cases like this. So on top of that, it's not just about XDR, right? A lot of teams, they don't have all the resources and time, right? So they might not have a SOC department to analyze all these threats coming in. Oftentimes departments, they are wearing many, many hats and you guys are being overworked, and it's really difficult to have to stay on top of this piece when you're just trying to make sure the house doesn't burn down on this side of the house, right? And so being able to boost your team with managed services such as MDR, maybe an MSSP, even AI at this point, because AI is not just for the attackers, but it also helps us be more efficient as well, right? And so being able to boost your team with those resources can help speed up and respond to attackers a lot faster. So the third part here is being able to communicate risk more effectively. This goes hand in hand with the first point of understanding your risk in the first place. So once you're able to measure your risk and then start identifying some of the weaknesses across your assets, you can start to benchmark, right? What's your baseline? Where do you compare like maybe a month ago, a week ago, or a daily basis? And also being able to benchmark against your peers. Oftentimes, CISO, CIOs are having conversations in their close-knit communities to figure out what they're doing to protect, right? You want to see how you're comparing against other industries in your same vertical, the same size of your organization, maybe the same region. Oftentimes, you can find some similarities based on the types of threats that you might be facing in comparison to others, right? So all of this is really about enabling that dialogue and that way promoting some action by understanding that risk. And to bring that point down a little bit further, right, using cyber risk as a communication tool, let's look at it from a perspective of CISO, right? They are talking to many different parties here. First one being the executive team and the board of directors, for instance. They can take the risk, the cyber risk that's being measured, the reporting, and be able to ask questions with the team. Hey, is our situation getting better or worse? You can see how you're trending along. How is our risk versus other peers? What are key focus areas for improvement? Also, what is our posture for a scary new threat that might emerge and hit us, right? These are questions that they want that you can ask, because if there's anything that's in the way that could affect your business at the end of the day, they're going to want to know. So having this information is very helpful to communicate those points, because oftentimes they don't speak the same language in security as your CISO does, right? And then also being able to communicate, also being able to communicate with your legal and finance, right? Oftentimes they have to meet compliance metrics. You can share those metrics and see where exactly your risks are lining up with certain frameworks, right? If you're having to meet NIST, GDPR, HIPAA, PCI, there are tools out there that can help you see exactly where you're aligning across those frameworks. So in case an audit comes up or something that having that information can quickly answer those questions around compliance and show where you're meeting and where you're not meeting. Additionally, cyber insurance questions, being able to answer some of those questions that come up, especially if you're shopping around for insurance, they're going to want to know how much of a liability you are. They want to see proof that you are improving or trending up in a positive manner to reduce your risk, right? So being able to have your cyber risk assessment right in front of you, you can have that conversation with them and show, hey, I am trending down, let's lower that premium. It's a simplified way of having that conversation, but you get the point, right? And then also being able to discuss effectiveness of spend, right? Based on our risk score, are we actually utilizing our security budget in the best way possible? Do we need to actually invest more? These are conversations that are going to help drive and influence those types of decisions in terms of purchasing as well. Right? And then lastly, having conversations with the security team, who is responsible for those risk-centric discussions, talking about how they can operationalize this information and actually reduce risk by patching your systems, making sure that you're caught up to best practices, making sure your S3 buckets are closed, like things of that nature where you're making sure that the security configurations in place are meeting compliance and being able to reduce that risk. So questions like, what are the key problem areas? What has improved or worsened recently? And where do we have staffing issues? Because that's a big one where a lot of the times you guys are understaffed, you need more FTEs or managed services. So that's a question that can come up and help regarding the cyber risk as well. So you can see that security is a conversation that's not just a niche for the IT team or department. It's now a conversation that needs to be embedded across the organization, right? Security at the forefront. And of course, you guys have been hearing generative AI or artificial intelligence, I'm sure too many times across the year, but for good reason, right? It's really changing the world for both the attackers and defenders. And so from the defender side, we're seeing a rapid evolution, right? The first iteration where is similar to ChatGPT, where you're just using a chat-style AI interface to ask questions to help with manual investigations, explaining alerts, and then also getting help for whatever else you ask it, right? That's the first evolution of it. And down the line, it's helped impact the SOC in a really good way, where it's accelerating the threat hunting, the response actions, being able to analyze scripts or even build them, right? And then also reporting in multiple languages, because oftentimes you're working in a multi-international or a large company that you're working with people that speak different languages, so that's a small little niche thing that can also help with that. And then also expanding use cases, right? So emergence of edge AI for the hybrid environments. There's new approaches to sandbox analysis for additional behavior, automation design using playbooks. There's risk reduction guidance, looking at vulnerabilities as well, CISO insights, even AI-assisted policy creation as well, and social engineering detection. Now, the second evolution, I think we're headed towards this way now, is AI-initiated user experiences can anticipate what the analyst needs using the data and the context from their current environment. So essentially, we can be proactive and be able to tell you, okay, this is what you might be getting down the line. This is the type of attack that we might suspect that you can be in trouble of, right? So it's just another way of using that AI data to stay ahead of the game there and be proactive. So there's probably more than, this is not an exhaustive list, there's probably so much more that AI is going to be able to do in this second evolution down the line too. So just quick key takeaways here. So remember, generative AI is reshaping cybersecurity, and they're offering both opportunities and challenges. It's definitely not something to turn your eye over. It's really important to stay on top of how this is changing. MFA is still a valuable security tool. This is something that you should still consider on top of other defense mechanisms that you can deploy as well. And then also you can enhance your cybersecurity strategies with generative AI by risk event and alert explanations, custom and prescriptive guidance for mitigation, and then lastly, making sure you have visibility and advanced threat hunting in place. So, but yeah, thank you so much for your time and attention. I'll hand this back to Dennis.
Yeah, any questions?
So, is there concern?
Yes.
Is there concern with like the second evolution you're talking about using Gen AI tools on the current environment of ingesting things like protected health information or personally identifiable information and being able to then be exploited and have that released?
That's a really good point there. So there is definitely a concern. Anyone that is trying to incorporate AI use should always, one of the top concerns is compliance and also data security. So you want to make sure if you're deciding to use your own tool, you can have a private LLM or you can utilize a third party, right? But you want to make sure that if it's a third party, that they're following the right compliance standards to not include and use customer data or sensitive information like that to build their models. That's one thing that you definitely want to make sure. I think there are some people that are following the GDP, which is one of the strictest compliance pieces for data control there. So that's a good start. In terms of the second evolution, where you're taking the context of your environment, I believe just like how we're able to do some of the correlation today with attack surface risk management and XDR, it doesn't use the PII and so forth. So I would assume it could follow the same route where it can still tell you the context of what type of attacks might come your way without the ingestion of your sensitive information. Because that's definitely one of the main points that people are wary about when it comes to AI. So that's a really good point that you brought up on that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Selena? All right, before we wrap up, back here 3:30 in the main ballroom for today's end note. Don't forget your surveys and a big round of applause, please.
Thank you.